Okay, I think maybe we are live, so let's get started. Good evening and welcome to this 33rd Legislative District Live Virtual Town Hall with your State Senator Karen Keiser and Representatives Tina Orwall and Mia Gregerson. The 33rd Legislative District covers part of King County, including SeaTac, Des Moines, Normandy Park, as well as parts of Kent, Burien, and Renton. My name is Lily, and I'll be your host tonight. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We are on day 73 of this 105-day legislative session, and your state lawmakers want to give you an update and answer your questions. So let's get started with some opening remarks, beginning with Senator Karen Keiser.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you all for joining us tonight on this virtual town hall. I love real in-person town hall meetings, but this time we can't do that. The good part of having a virtual town hall, though, is more people can join us and we can talk and interact on the virtual level. But by next year, I hope we're back in one-on-one mode with our town halls. My name is Senator Karen Keiser. I represent you in the state legislative House chamber known as the Senate. And I work in the Senate as President Pro Tem, which means I preside for the body, for the entire body, when the Lieutenant Governor is not available. And I also serve as chair of the Senate Labor, Commerce, and Tribal Affairs Committee. I also serve on health care and long-term care. Also on Ways and Means, which is the committee that builds the budget. And last but not least, I'm vice chair of the Rules Committee. So that's my official job, but my real job is representing you. So tonight, let's hear what's going on in your lives and what's on your mind, rather than me telling you what I've been up to. We can discuss that later. Thanks again for joining us tonight. Tina.
Thank you. I'm Tina Orwall, and I have the honor of representing our district in Olympia. My roles, I'm Speaker Pro Tem. I also serve on public safety, civil rights and judiciary, and rules. And again, I want to welcome you tonight. It is kind of surreal, this session, but I'm just so grateful to all the staff and people working so hard that we can do our business in Olympia. And we have a lot to do to support families that are struggling and businesses that are struggling. So again, it's an honor to be here, and I look forward to hearing from you tonight.
And I'm Mia Gregerson, and I'm so happy to be here representing the 33rd. Also, I have the best seatmates ever. My committee assignments have changed a little bit since last year. I'm the vice chair of appropriations, and we're getting pretty excited to roll out a budget here later this week. It's a very busy time. I'm vice chair of the Members of Color Caucus, and we're growing by leaps and bounds. So we're a very busy caucus there. I'm now a member of the Rules Committee, and I'm still on state government and tribal relations. So I'm excited to have a good conversation tonight, and I miss seeing you in person, and I hope everyone's doing well.
All right, thank you. Folks, Representative Orwall would like to start addressing misinformation regarding a housing bill. Take it away, Representative Orwall.
Thank you, Lilia. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about House Bill 1465. You know, leading into the session, I was just really worried about people staying in their homes. Many of you know I've worked on foreclosure for many years, trying to help prevent people from going into foreclosure. I'm worried about people who need rental assistance, as well as people who don't have homes. And so I introduced House Bill 1465, and it's about a progressive estate tax. The first thing I'll tell you is that it had a hearing, but it's not moving. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about what it would have done. So a progressive is, we looked at right now, if you have an estate that's worth over 2.1 million, anything over that amount is subject to capital gains. Now that was passed years ago, long before I was in the legislature. So my bill actually moves that from 2.1 to 2.5, and about 25% of people who pay it now would no longer pay it. and another 53% would actually have a reduction. As you get to levels above 10 million, as far as the value of the house, then they go up slightly over time. The biggest increases are really these that are worth 50 million or actually $1 billion. The reason I introduced, and also there's family businesses, we want to make sure we're giving them more reductions. But the reason I introduced it is that, one, I was just really wanting to reduce estate tax for many families. And I also wanted to have revenue for services like foreclosure prevention, housing equity, helping the homeless. And it seemed like maybe a possible funding source. I guess the last thing I would say is I'm really worried about our tax system. It really is kind of upside down and it's not fair. I feel like it's a really heavy burden on working families, on seniors, on small businesses. And so even though this bill is not going forward, I hope we can have a conversation about how do we create a tax system that's fair for all. So again, I just wanted to give you that update and thank you.
All right. We're going to start with a question from a nurse who unfortunately we don't have a name. She is asking, as an RN at a local hospital, if I get sick due to exposure to COVID, would I be required to use my personal paid time off hours or personal or paid time off hours to quarantine? If it's the second option, this is not fair for healthcare workers.
Well, I'm going to agree with you. I wish I knew your name and what hospital you're at. And I would say if you are exposed, you do need to quarantine. Even if you don't get sick, you need to take time away from the job. And this is one of the reasons why I introduced and am working hard to pass what I call my HELSA bill, which is the Health Emergency Labor Standards Act. And we have that bill, which, by the way, just got out of the House committee today and is going to be heading for the floor, provides many local protections for what we call essential workers. And obviously, healthcare workers are part of that. I began thinking about this bill last spring. My daughter worked as an EMT with an ambulance company. She was exposed to COVID 5 times. Each time she had to take 10 days off in quarantine. And she ran through her sick leave and her paid time off in about 2 exposures. And the next 3, she just had to go unpaid. It was outrageous. She showed me how unfair the system is. And we have grocery store workers who've been going to the grocery store and working every day all through this awful pandemic and having the risk of exposure. So the HELSA bill, which is Senate Bill 5115, started out as a big omnibus bill covering everybody and providing all kinds of very important safeguards. We've divided up the bill into different pieces to make it easier to pass, and it's moving forward. So when we get our bills passed, you will not be required to use your PTO for quarantine. You will be protected with presumptive workers' compensation coverage, which means that your time will be paid for and your medical will be paid for if you get COVID. And this applies to all essential workers, whether you're a nurse, a childcare worker, a bus driver, or a meat packing plant worker.
Okay. Our next question is from Brenda, and Brenda's asking, landlords have been asked to carry the brunt of the eviction moratorium. Many are falling behind in mortgage payments. What is being done to bring fairness back?
Thank you. I will start by answering that. And I can't imagine the stress that landlords are under. The legislature, we've been working on a number of fronts to support both landlords and tenants. One of our first packages we passed, I think, had about $280 million to help on rental payments for landlords. I also am working on legislation to expand the Foreclosure Prevention Act to include small landlords so that they can have access not only to housing counseling, but to mediation services Again, I hope that's a way to support landlords through this difficult time.
Okay. Next, we have Roger, and he has a question about vaccine availability.
I don't know who wants to jump in. I do know.
I'm just wondering what the question is exactly about availability.
Oh, sorry, about, it's difficult to find them right now.
Senator, do you want to speak on that, or you want me to?
I'll just start with this. About 2 months ago, I started making a lot of noise and pushing a lot of people to get more access to vaccines in South King County. I was really pleased that King County Public Health did open a mass vaccination center at the Showware Center in Kent and also down in Auburn. So that was a big step in the right direction, but we have a lot further to go. And we are working at many levels. The CMAR clinics are having vaccinations available and appointments available. A lot of teachers and educators can get vaccinations at their local drugstores now. And so we're coming forward with much more availability than we had before. Now, we still have the tiers of individual groups that are, I guess you'd say, legal, although it's an honor system, to get a vaccination. I read about vaccine chasers in the newspaper. I don't know if you saw that, but some people are going to vaccination places like up at the stadium in Seattle and just waiting for leftover vaccines. And sometimes they get their vaccinations that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other good news is that I think starting on Wednesday, they'll go into phase 1B in categories 3 and 4. So that's going to open it up for people over 60 and people with comorbidity and have other medical conditions. So we really hope that opens it up for a lot more people in our community to get the vaccine.
So I'd like to also talk a little bit about our early action bill. It was a $2.2 billion investment of early action federal dollars. And with that, we really were able to jumpstart the Vaccine Collaborative, which is a similar type of product as we did with the census. And as you know, we were the #1 state when it came to census sign up. So we think that these funds going directly through Department of Health to work with our community-based organizations, with those that have relationships with trusted messengers, is really going to help make sure that we get more people in South King County signed up and getting access to those vaccinations.
And it just came out, and this is good news, that more than 25% of the people in King County have received at least their first vaccination. And that's a really high rate. Most states have rates in the level of 4 or 5 or 6%. So King County is doing a good job.
Great, thank you. Next, we have a question from Erica. And Erica is saying, can you please talk about the Clean Fuel Standard Bill, and do you support the plan for the low carbon fuel tax?
Well, I guess I'll start. I was very proud. We did pass that bill out of the House, and I was very proud to vote yes. I think it's especially important as we're looking at our district and air quality issues. This starts with increasing biofuels. And again, it's not necessarily applying to jet fuel yet, but as we increase the capacity for these cleaner fuels, that's going to help our air quality. And I think that's really important as we're seeing the conditions, the health conditions we have in our area because of the pollution. So again, it's great for the environment, and it's also great for the air we breathe.
Yeah, I think, low carbon fuels is only one of all of the different bills and packages of policy that we support. When it comes to climate change, we cannot mess around. It's really about policy, whether it's low to zero emissions in our future, whether it's converting our transportation system, such as our transit buses. into EV, whether it's helping low and moderate income get access to EV vehicles, rebuilding our buildings, and so many other ways to ensure that we're keeping our natural resources healthy, whether it's air, water, or buildings.
All right, thank you. Next, we have a question about, let's see. What are you doing to help people who are struggling to keep their kids learning while they have to be remote? So I think Representative Gregerson, that would be.
Well, I'm sorry, I actually didn't hear the first part of your question.
Sorry. What are you doing to help people who are struggling to keep their kids learning while they have to be remote?
Thank you, Lily. I apologize for that. Yeah, remote learning loss is a huge deal. We've been dealing this now for over a year, and our poor parents and teachers are really suffering from having to also be navigators of the system, whether it's the devices or navigating the platforms. So it's pretty exciting to see that our schools will start to open safely. But in the meantime, the state needs to invest in helping to ensure that until broadband is an actual utility, that we can bring down the affordability, especially here in South King County. It's too expensive. If you make less than $50,000 a year, you're not as likely to have fast internet at home. And if you're a family of three, we need to make sure that we get you the internet and the speed that you need, along with devices. So we're working on a one-to-one initiative this year. Every student should have the appropriate device for learning from home. So I'm excited to have us pass some, roll out our budget later this week so you can see all of our investments to ensure that we believe that every child has the ability to learn no matter where you are, South King County or rural Washington.
Okay. Next, we have a question from David, and he's saying, with an improved revenue projection and relief funds from the federal government, please explain what justifies additional state taxes, for example, capital gains.
That's a really good question, David. The capital gains bill, which is out of the Senate now, was passed by the Senate, and I did vote for it, and is in the House for consideration, is not going to produce any revenue for this year's budget or next year's budget or next year's budget, because it will, if it passes, it will be taken to court, and the court will finally get to rule on whether or not capital gains is an excise tax, which is how I read the law, or whether it's an income tax, or whether it's legal or not. So once the court rules, and I believe it will rule that it's legal, then the capital gains tax will take effect, but not before we get that final ruling. So what we're doing with the capital gains bill is making sure that the revenues that are generated once it is finally legal, 3, 4, 5 years from now, will go to very important but and underfunded services such as child care services and such as the Working Families Tax Credit. So those kinds of expenditures are not in the current budget to any huge amount, but can be funded in the future through a capital gains tax. Now, the capital gains tax is only applicable to someone who is making $250,000 in profits from the sale of stocks and bonds or other major assets. And I'm going to just bet you that there isn't anybody in the 33rd district who this will apply to. And even if it did apply to you, the capital gains rate is lower than the sales tax. So keep in mind that this is only for the ultra wealthy and well off and economically secure. And it is part of our effort, as Tina mentioned earlier in this town hall, to turn our upside down tax system right side up, so that currently the lowest income people in our state are paying a much higher rate of state taxes than the highest income people in our state. The lowest income level of our families, working families, are paying something like 17% of their income for state and local taxes. The top 1% pay less than 1% of their income in state and local taxes. And that's just not fair. We need to turn the upside down system right side up and making sure that the tax system provides the revenue we need for a decent standard of living and decent services and education and a clean environment and all the important things our government can do for us. But we also need to make it fair. And this is a piece of how we're going to make it more fair.
All right, next we have Susan, and Susan asks, what is being done to protect renters from eviction due to COVID-19 related inability to pay rent?
Well, we just saw a recent executive order by the governor who extended the moratorium until I believe the end of May. Is that true? And that's going to bring so much relief to renters and workers who are worried about their future. In the meantime, as you know, the federal government just released a huge package. I know we're calling it ARPA, but and it's got a very long title. But with that are going to be hundreds of millions of dollars coming through the state that'll go directly to landlords to be able to work on mitigating all of the back rent. So those are the discussions that we're going to be having in the next few days. And I hope that you'll get involved to ensure that we are doing exactly what we need to with those dollars, what they're intended to do. And that is to help renters pay back rent while they're trying to continue to go back to work, keep them and their families safe, and then also be able to put food on the table. So these are really important decisions we're making, and I feel very confident that the state will be there to support renters who will be facing large rent when the time comes.
Yeah, the other thing that's being done is that there's a couple counties, including King, that's piloting a program. It's almost like a mediation program with court that brings renters and landlords together to negotiate payment. And again, reaching that agreement and avoiding eviction. So we're really glad that's happening in King County, and we're looking to expand that in other parts of the state.
Okay, next we have a question that doesn't have a name. But the question is, why has the legislature not funded the working families tax credit even after it's been in the books for over a decade?
Right. I'll speak to that because we came out with our operating budget. We're coming out with it tomorrow. We got a little bit of a preview. So I'm going to tell you we are going to fund the working families tax credit. It was passed into law right before the Great Recession of 2009. I was there. I voted for it then. And we were, at that time, in a position financially and politically that the choice was in the Great Recession to have an austerity budget. So we cut. We eliminated the entire basic health plan. 110,000 people got kicked off the basic health plan. I was healthcare chair at the time, and I still feel guilty about that. It took us probably 10 years to come back to where we were in 2009 with our budget. And by 2019, we were in a place that was relatively stable. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So we've been in a really awful budget squeeze for a decade since the Working Families Tax Credit was passed. It never got implemented. We're getting out of the budget squeeze now, and we're going to implement it. And that means that working families will be able to get a rebate on the sales taxes that they pay. And that will come through a kind of earned income tax credit, which is what is available at the federal level. Since we don't have an income tax, we can't do exactly the same program, but we can do a rebate on sales taxes through the Department of Revenue. And I think we've got it ready to go. I'm encouraged.
Okay, so before we continue with another question, I want to tell you that you're getting kudos from some people. Arlene says she's impressed at how easy it was to join the meeting, as well as its quality, and that she would like to stay, but she has to go, so that's too bad.
Goodbye, Arlene.
All right. Next, we have a question from Matt on homelessness. Matt is asking, what are you doing to reduce homelessness in Kent Valley and address illegal camping in city and county parks and neighborhood car prowls?
I will jump in first. Matt, that's a great question. It's really important. And it's important more than ever that people have homes. And of course, it's just heartbreaking to see throughout our community so many families, individuals that are homeless. One of the things we passed off the floor of the House today, which had very strong bipartisan support, was increasing what's called recording fees. And these dollars will go toward helping people who are homeless. A lot of the programs go through Commerce, and they provide services, services within housing and housing first. So that was millions of dollars that we will be using at the state level. We also have the Housing Trust Fund, and I know some of the pieces we're working on in South King County is expanding housing, workforce housing, deeply affordable housing, and that's important to help engage and get people off the streets and into housing. And so I think those are, just a couple steps of many that will need to happen to really address the homeless crisis that we have going on right now.
Okay, let's see. Jackie has a question about dental coverage. She says, I was disappointed that Senate Bill 5142 to expand dental therapy didn't even get a hearing this year. How do you plan to improve access to dental care?
Oh, Jackie, I am so frustrated about that bill. Senate Bill 5142, I think it's the third or fourth year that we've had this effort underway to expand dental therapy. And I agree, I was very disappointed that it didn't even get out of the gate. Dental therapy is opposed by the Dental Association. And it's because the Dental Association is, well, they tell us they're concerned about having technicians do dental care, such as filling a cavity, for instance, or providing for other pretty simple dental procedures. Dental therapy program has been developed to articulate for dental hygienists who are very, very important in our dental health, as they keep our teeth clean and they spot early problems, and they're very accessible. So the approach is to have dental hygienists become dental therapists and then be more of an assistant to the dentist than a separate approach. Nevertheless, our goal to get dental therapy broader and more accessible has failed so far this session. We're going to have to regroup and figure out a new path to make sure that we can provide full dental services to more people. Dental care is one of the most important healthcare services that is not available for low-income people, and we have to do better. I was so disappointed. I share your frustration, Jackie.
And I agree with Senator Keiser on that. And just like climate change and homelessness, access to dental care cannot wait. And if we can't pass these pieces of legislation that are critical, there are other things that we can do in the meantime. And so you see in our capital budget that we just rolled out today, we have nearly $6 million investing in dental clinics as another way to continue to provide spaces and places and build out for dental treatment, knowing that at some point in time we will have dental therapists. I think in our operational budget, you'll see too, we're going to invest in continuing to promote dental therapy training on the tribal lands and in partnerships with our community technical colleges. So don't feel too bad because we're still working around the edges, and hopefully, like Senator Keiser said, next year will be the year.
Thank you, Mia, for that information about the budget. That's very encouraging.
Okay, next we have Karen, who says, thank you for the ASL interpreter. So thank you very much. And Matt Mahoney says, hi, Tina, Karen, and Mia.
Hi.
Okay, let's get back to work. Okay, so we have Gail asking about voting. How are we ensuring that every eligible voter can register and vote?
Senator Keiser, do you want to talk about the bill that you passed off the floor today?
Well, we had, I think it was a 5-hour debate on voting today in the Senate, and we got the bill passed finally. Essentially, the bill would restore voting rights to people who complete their sentence in a state prison. And I tell you, the debate was enlightening in a sense, because many of the people who opposed the bill spoke about voting as a privilege, and being in a democracy is a privilege. But voting in a democracy is a right, in my opinion. It's a wonderful thing we have democracy, but restricting voting, in my view, restricts democracy, because you don't hear the voice of all the people. I kind of joke and say I think every baby born in this country should get a voting registration card when they get their birth certificate. And I honestly kind of think that should be true, because it's a right of every American to have an access to the ballot and to vote. And that's just a fundamental value and principle that I hold dear.
I think voting in democracy is something that we've been watching for the last 4 years be under attack. And Washington State really went into the last 4 years with a lot of bills and a lot of policies that other states were envious of. But we can still move farther. And you're seeing us really invest in a better redistricting commission. We're making sure we're having public forums. We're also making sure that if ballot boxes are improperly marked, you will get in trouble. And we want people to feel safe in knowing that their ballot is going to go into the appropriate ballot box. And as Senator Keiser said, we're going to make sure that everybody knows that you're valid, and we're going to reduce as many barriers as we can for you to get access to voting, make it easier, and know when to vote.
Okay. Hey, I want to just clarify, or rather inform, that we're getting questions from like all over the place, from YouTube, from Facebook, from SurveyMonkey, from email. So if you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook and you're like, wait, they asked a question that's not even here. Well, that's because we got it some other way, because we have all sorts of sources. Okay. Next, we have Oscar, who has a question on firearms. Given the many gun bills that died this year, what is the legislature going to do to stop mass shootings? Eesh.
The one bill that I'm aware of that we voted out of the Senate had to do with open carry in demonstrations. As you know, there's been this pretty disturbing trend for people, I call it brandishment. They come with their guns to show that they're armed in some kind of public space. And I worry that kind of show-off approach is kind of inciting fear and chills the discussion of a demonstration, perhaps, or maybe provokes people to be confrontational. And I think all of those are all very negative results. So personally, I supported the bill that limits open carry at demonstrations. And I think that we really need to have a frank conversation about how we can take real action to reduce the kind of gun violence that is just tearing our country apart. These mass shootings just break your heart. I'll never forget, I was on the floor of the House during a session when the Columbine shooting happened so long ago, and we were in tears. That was the very first awful, unexplainable mass shooting. And it's just been relentless ever since. And we're getting numb to it, which scares me. We have to do something more. And we're probably going to have to do it at the state level because it's so difficult at the national level.
Okay. So the next question, we do not have a name, but the question is regarding the recent attacks on Asian Americans, what are you doing to stand in solidarity with the Asian community?
I guess as the Asian, I'm asked to talk about that, it feels like. As you know, the Asian community, communities of color, Indigenous and Black communities are not a monolith. And so we have a lot of healing to do. We have a lot of conversation to do to make sure that we're on the same page on how we stand up to hate and how we work together to ensure that while there are anti-Asian attacks now, our Black and brown brothers and sisters have been attacked for a very long time. And so we don't want to lose this opportunity nor this moment to ensure that we need to stand together and say no to hate, no to racist attacks, no to racism. And so I think that's through policy and through education. I think it's through funding and through collaboration. And I think it's through having conversations in every community there is, even in a time where we're forced to do it via Zoom. And I'm hopeful that everybody's doing that where they are.
And I would just say we all need to speak out when really hateful things are said and hateful actions are taken, and not be silent. We need to speak and we need to object. In particular, with this situation, I point back to those awful slurs about the Kung flu or the China virus and all of the other slurs that came from our national president at the time. And we really have to be, we need to have to speak out and object to those kinds of hateful statements because they do provoke people to hateful acts.
Yeah, and we do need to stand in solidarity. And we had a very important bill. Representative Valdez introduced the hate crimes bill, and I went through one of the committees I serve on. And the stories are just heart-wrenching. But what it does is it actually increases the penalties and crimes and amount of criminal action for people that commit hate crimes. It extends sentences. We didn't end up moving that bill, but I do think we need to take action to say we will not tolerate this. And it's just heartbreaking. So I think there's policy we need to do, but at the end of the day, we just need to stand together and just say not in our community.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad that Representative Orwall brought that up because that bill was actually put down because communities of color asked for that. Restorative policies and restorative action, putting black and brown people, criminalizing them is not something that we want to make worse. And I think our communities are so hurt right now that they're afraid that if they're not part of that policy building, then potentially we're causing more harm. So I think that setting that bill down was on purpose and intentional, but there's also a strong commitment, like I started off saying, is to bring all of our community together, regardless of race, creed, color, to ensure that as we talk about this very delicate topic, that we do it together and ensure that no one is hurt in the meantime. So thank you, Representative Orwall, for bringing that up.
Yep. We will work together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a note from, let's see, Senator Noble saying, thank you, 33rd. So that's nice.
That's nice.
Okay, next we have okay, this one has no name again, sorry. There are many bills on police reform and police accountability. It's hard to keep track. Can you talk about those and what will they do?
I want to just give a shout out to our colleague Senator Joe Wen from West Seattle, whose bill on police reform passed the House today. I believe the bill is 5055. This is a wonderful bill. It went through my committee, so I worked on it personally, and it will reform the way police arbitrations occur so that it will be much more transparent, much more professional, and on top of that, we'll actually get the data that we need about how many of these arbitrations occur, because currently no one knows. We hear anecdotes, but we don't have any data and no real facts. So that's one of the first bills coming from the Senate to pass both houses, headed for the governor's desk. But one of the very first bills we passed was a bill by Representative Lovick, John Lovick, another wonderful former police officer. And Tina, you could probably explain that bill better than me.
Yeah, no, he's done such great work. Representative Lovick, Representative Johnson, Representative Entman are really been our leaders on the House side. And he's worked bills from the collection of data around excessive force. We need to understand what's going on in our communities to really take action. We also, Representative Johnson has a bill about excessive force as well, and what are the practices that really lead to de-escalation, and how do we have training and accountability that those are used. And so that was one of the important bills that was sent out of the House. Representative Entman has a bill about accountability and setting up an independent office that can review cases of excessive force. And so again, I think it is that accountability and tracking and transparency that's so needed in our system.
And there's one other really big Senate bill on state certification. To be a police officer, you have to have a state certification, and the bill will reform how that certification is allowed or is taken away. And it's a very big bill.
Yeah, we named some of our colleagues who are working very hard and were leaders in this space, but I feel like we should also mention Representative Tai and Representative Ramos. Mm-hmm. There really was a very large group of folks who spent the entire interim talking to community and listening, really trying to work hard to build trust and preserve what little we have left when it comes to law enforcement and our communities of color. And I know we talked earlier about gun responsibility bills, and we didn't have a whole lot to say. And part of that is because our focus this year really was around police reform and sentencing reform. And we did not want to take our eye off that. And as a caucus, that's a very high priority for us. And there's lots of bills and great champions. And so you heard some examples today, but I promise you that commitment, whether all of them get to the governor or not, will not go away when session ends.
The other thing I would mention is that we have been doing work in South King County with the Kent Police Department and communities of color, trying to work together on new officer orientation, where new officers would do community placements and have a mentor of a community member for their first 60 days before actually wearing a uniform. And so we are looking at that program. University of Washington is helping us with the evaluation tool, and we're hoping to get funding for that this session. Again, it's nice to see that work happening locally.
Okay. Next, we have another question without a name. Okay. See, now this is not fair. We need names, people. Come on, give me your name. Okay. This question is about small businesses. Family businesses are hurting right now. What are you doing to help?
Well, one of the things I did right off the bat, because I have the committee that has oversight for unemployment insurance, was get a bill together that would reduce the increased premium that was coming for all small businesses and really all businesses, because the pandemic hit so fast and so hard, and so many people were thrown out of work for so long. The trust fund of our unemployment insurance system was requiring by law, because we are fiduciarily responsible to maintain the trust fund to be solvent, by law, there were hikes in the premiums coming that were huge. I'll just mention I visited a local where I go to get my hair cut in Burien, and the owner of the salon told me he got his premium increase and it went from $200 per employee per year to $1,300 per employee per year, and he said he'd have to close. Well, we passed one of the very first bills with an emergency clause, Senate Bill 5061, to reduce those premium increases. And it was signed by the governor and it went into effect. So the April premium tax bills have been reduced significantly from what they were going to be. But there's still more work to be done. So today I dropped yet another bill for unemployment insurance relief. And it may be there will be future bills as well. We'll see how long this pandemic goes on. We must rebuild the trust fund because we are responsible to keep it solvent. But this pandemic has been so unfair to small business. It's a very uneven hit. You know, the Costco's and the Kroger's and the Amazons are doing gangbuster business, but the Main Street stores and retailers and restaurants have just been hit so hard. So many of them have had to go out of business. So we're doing what we can with unemployment insurance and premiums. We're also doing small business grants. There are many different small business grants through both the federal government and the Department of Commerce. So you can access those grants by applying through the State Department of Commerce or through the Federal Small Business Administration.
Yeah, I appreciate the grants. I hope we see an expansion, and with the federal dollars coming in, I hope more of those go into the unemployment insurance. I'm really worried about that. I do have a bill that gives small businesses more time on their real property, knowing that it's a difficult time, and we want to give you an opportunity to catch up.
Okay. Hey, time flies when you're having fun. Look at that. We've got like 12 minutes left. Quickly. Okay. Next, we have a question from Pam. And I know, Senator, that you just talked about unemployment insurance, but this is related, but not the same thing. So Pam is asking, this pandemic has been going on for more than a year. What's going to happen to people who have lost their jobs, who run out of their unemployment insurance benefits?
Well, thank goodness Congress acted and passed the American Rescue Plan, because part of it will extend the extended benefits. Normally, unemployment benefits usually last about 24 weeks. As you know, this pandemic has gone on for over a year. So we've had extended benefits for many, and we've extended the benefits again now to, I believe, September. So this has just been the most awful thing, this pandemic, on people's lives. You know, we had 500,000 Washingtonians lose their jobs, and we still have a huge number of people who are out of work, and a huge number more who are afraid to go back to work because of COVID. So a combination of having a safe workplace through having safe labor standards and employer standards for people, and having a secure unemployment benefit program is part of our safety net. And I think, God willing, we'll make it through if this pandemic dies down now in the next 6 months or so.
And I want to also pay recognition, because it's very South King County. There's 100,000 undocumented workers in our state, and they do not qualify for unemployment insurance through the federal government. So the state has stepped up, and early this year we passed $65 million to, again, make sure that there are payments going out to our undocumented workers who are doing lots of work in our community and deserving to have these funds. We're hopeful that more and more are going back to work, but we're committed to continuing to fund that fund until we're through this pandemic, and ensuring that even those that don't qualify for the unemployment benefits through the federal government also have unemployment security.
All right. So now we're switching gears and we have a name. Jeannie. Jeannie says, I've heard that there is a new 988 number that we can call instead of 911 so that it's a mental health response instead of a police response. When will that be ready?
Well, thank you, Jeannie, for that question. I'm very proud to sponsor the bill to help our state prepare, and I've been working with so many of my colleagues to get this up and ready. The line begins July of 2022. And in the meantime, we need to get ready. We do have suicide hotlines, but we need those to expand and we need them to hire more staff. We would imagine that we're going to see triple or more the volume coming in, but we're also creating call centers. These call centers will have clinicians who will be able to kind of triage what that person or family member needs. We're looking at rapid response teams so clinicians can respond when outreach is needed, as well as next day appointments and follow up in the community. So I'm really excited. To me, this is a catalyst we've been waiting for a long time. So many people in our system end up being traumatized who are in crisis, and we can do better, and we will do better. This is funded similar to 911, which is through a telecom fee. So for a penny a day, we can save lives. And we need to. We have so many people that are in so much distress. We know our youth are struggling, and we know we need to be there, and that immediate response is going to make a huge difference. So thank you for asking, and we're working hard on that.
Okay. All right, we got to start hurrying up here. So Louisa is asking, there are some concerns by law enforcement related to some of the bills. How are you explaining these bills to them?
When I was working with Senator Wen on the arbitration bill, I worked very closely with the unions that represent police officers. Their acronym is WACOPS, so Washington Association of, anyway, and also the other acronym FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, and 2 or 3 other organizations that represent police officers. And we had very frank conversations about the need for accountability, the need for reform, and they were open to change. They were not saying, no way, we're not going there. We're not going to think about it. We're not going to go there. We had good conversations, good interactions, and a lot of agreement. So I have to say that although there's probably anxiety, and because change is always hard, anxiety and concern among the frontline police officers, I want them to know we are working very closely with their organizations, their unions, and their agencies to ensure that their concerns are respected and that we take into account the possibilities and the arrangements that we can make to achieve both our goals, which is police accountability and safety for the public.
Yes, and I would really, I just
ahead.
wanted to really say thank you. You know, I talk frequently with our police chiefs and officers, and we have the training commission in our district. The state has responsibility for training officers, and so a lot of what we've talked about is how do we give them the tools they need to do this job, especially as we're looking at de-escalation or other skill sets. So again, we all need to work together to make our community safer.
Yes, and the Criminal Justice Training Commission will become a larger organization if this certification bill passes that is likely to come over from to the House. And it will become a kind of disciplinary board in the sense that most professions have. For instance, our doctors have a medical disciplinary board, as do our nurses, as do dentists. And that kind of standard that's accountable and somewhat public is a way that we feel that we can really improve the standards and the public's trust.
Okay. Next, we have Aaron, who has a question about food insecurity. Aaron says, food insecurity is continuing to rise unabated in the pandemic. So what are you doing to help?
Yeah, food insecurity was one of the things we knew right away, even before we left session last year, was going to be a problem. And we've watched caseloads go up into the mid 2 millions around Washington state. But with that, we've been extremely resilient regardless of where you are in Washington, especially in rural Washington, is where we saw a lot of food insecurity. So emergency centers came together with community-based organizations, and food banks came together with local religious institutions, summer meal programs in the schools. So lots and lots of just community-based problem solving. With that, the state was able to really support it through funding through OSPI and through the schools, whether it's extending SNAP benefits. There's now a pandemic EBT card. But we also know that the food system is an entire circle. So we need to make sure that the agricultural system and the resiliency of our farms are doing well. We're investing in soil initiatives. And we actually have a proviso coming forward too in equity in farming to make sure that our Black and Brown Indigenous farmers have the tools and the funding and the resources they need. So lots going on to make sure people have healthy, nutritious food in Washington state. Hopefully we'll get through this pandemic and people will get back to work.
Okay, our last question for the evening is from Shelley. And she says, when will our kids go back to school full time? Hey, I love my boys, but I'm not the greatest teacher.
Oh, it's a gamble to predict anything with this pandemic, which is so diabolical. But I hope next fall we'll all be back in school and in person. And one of the big issues and side effects of having kids at home learning at home is that a lot of moms have quit their jobs and dropped out of the workforce to make sure they could help their kids get the learning that they needed. And I know personally several women who have quit their jobs, good jobs, and gone home and are working with their kids. And we've seen the lowest rate now of women in the workforce than we've had in 30 years in this country. And it's kind of ironic that today is Equal Pay Day, which is 3 months into this year and is the day when women normally would have equal pay, would earn equal pay with men. It takes 3 months longer. But with all the women dropping out of the workplace, I fear for equal pay.
Okay, we are done. It is 7:59 and 37 seconds. Look at that. Okay, so next we're going to go to closing remarks. But if we couldn't get to your question, or if you sent us a question in one of the many ways that you could send us a question, please know that we are going to be forwarding all the questions to the 3 members, and they will be getting back to you if they have good answers for you. So we're going to start with closing remarks. Senator?
I want to thank you, Lila. You've been a great moderator, kept us on track and on time. Thank you very much. And all the staff that's helped with putting this town hall. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in. I hope we've covered your concerns at least a little bit, and hopefully we can do this again. One of the good things about the virtual space is more people can participate, and that's always important in a democracy. Thank you for joining us.
Representative Orwall or Gregerson?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. I also want to thank the staff, and I want to thank the interpreter. I'm just really excited that people are joining us. And I want to say, please don't hesitate to reach out for emails. That could be available for phone call or Zoom. These are tough times, and we want to make sure we're addressing issues you have.
I too want to thank everybody for your commitment to learning about the issues, and we hope that we're doing the best we can to make you feel comfortable so you can reach out anytime, whether it's by phone or by email. We have a district office in Kent, so at some point I hope that that's back open again. And thanks again for joining us.
Oh, look at there's Tawana on. Hi, Tawana.
Hey, folks, thank you so much for joining us. And, we're doing a lot of these events, and we'll probably have another one for the 33rd after session, to give you all the scoop. So take care and good evening, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.